Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maciej Sciera. I came here from Poland, from TÜV Rheinland. I'm Global Scheme Manager responsible for European MDR and ISO 13485. I joined the notified body more or less 16 years ago as an auditor, product specialist, certifier. Now I'm responsible for managing the certification schemes. Today I would like to present you some updates from European Union and some topics related to surveillance activities. Let's start from the, let's say, beginning of the updates. In 2024, at the end of 2024, the European Commission decided that the requirements for medical devices in European Union need to be reviewed, need to be refreshed, need to be a little bit modified. And in the period between December 2024 and March 2025, the Commission opened a public consultation when tried to collect information from notified bodies, from manufacturers, from competent authorities, which requirements should be changed. And the collected feedback was huge. And at that time, the Commission decided that the update of the requirements, it will be performed in two steps. One step, changes in the requirements for notified bodies. It means changes in the conformity assessment procedures also. And this step was planned to be implemented faster at the beginning of this year. And second step, wide change of the requirements. We call it MDR, IVDR 2.0, in form of amending regulation, which will require more time in the legislation process. It will be big change. It will be big change. Currently, the first step is already published. The second step, the Commission published proposal. And the proposal is currently discussed between the Commission, Parliament, and Council. It means the bodies of the European Union, manufacturers or representatives of manufacturers, notified bodies, competent authorities. In this presentation, I will show you the general overview, the changes in MDR, IVDR to 0, but I would like to focus more on the implementing regulation, which was already published at the beginning of May. This is not too big document. In general, it consists of 10 articles, 4 main sessions. One section is for quotation, one is for timelines and interruptions. I think this is the most important for manufacturers at this moment. Monitoring of duration and costs of conformity assessment procedures. This is a new requirement for notified body and requirements for recertification. However, I would rather use term renewal of certificates. As I said, the document was already published. It came into force 20 days after publication, so more or less at the beginning of this week. The articles for quotation and timelines and interruptions, they will come into force in February 2027. The requirements for monitoring of duration and costs in May 2027, the notified body has additional requirements for reporting of results of the monitoring. It will be mandatory from beginning of 2028. And the requirements for renewal of certificates, it will come into force in November 2027. Let's start with Article 1, related to quotation. I would say there is no huge changes in the quotation process. However, in this regulation, there is precisely described what information notified bodies need to collect to issue quotation for conformity assessment procedure. What the information is: of course, name and address of the manufacturer. If the manufacturer is located out of European Union, information about authorized representative. This is something new. Information necessary to determine whether the manufacturer is small and medium enterprise. Truly speaking, we ask about that. We ask about the size of the company. It means number of employees, because we use this information to calculate duration of the audit. But at this moment, we will need to ask also about annual turnover, because these two factors determine whether the company is small, medium, or large enterprise. At this moment, there is no direct impact on quotation. However, we need to collect this information. The European Commission has some directives which says that small and medium companies should be better treated. We should support the small companies. So at this moment, we need to collect the information. Later on, I will show you something what will come with new MDR IVDR 2.0. Of course, if the company has more than one location, we need to know about all the locations which are covered by the quality management system, number of employees per site, shifts, and description of activities per each site. If production or design development processes are outsourced to subcontractor, we also need to be informed about these subcontractors, and we need to investigate, we need to make a decision whether we need to audit these suppliers. The most important information, what devices are intended to be covered by the conformity assessment procedure. It means description of the device, intended purpose, characteristics, risk classification. This information determines what activities we need to perform within scope of conformity assessment procedure. And at the end, which conformity assessment procedure was selected by the manufacturers. For class 2A, class 2B devices, there are at least two possible scenarios, so the manufacturer needs to decide which conformity assessment procedure wants to follow. Additional information, so this information which I presented already, this is for initial certification. In case of changes in the product portfolio, changes in the quality management system, the manufacturer needs to provide us information about planned changes. And based on this information, we can calculate the quotation for the evaluation of the change and, if necessary, update of the certificate. In case of recertification, renewal, of course, we need to have link to the specific certificate which was issued, and if the manufacturer plans changes in scope of the certificate, also we need to know about that. Other information, of course, the manufacturer can provide us additional information like certificates for the subcontractors or organizational chart, which helps us in better planning of the conformity assessment procedure. What is also new, it was not described directly in MDR. There was one MDCG guide which said about structured dialogue. What is structured dialogue? Structured dialogue is exchange of technical regulatory information between the notified body and the manufacturer. And it was in the past also used. We did not use term structured dialogue, we more frequently use term technical meetings. We use this in the conformity, in the assessment stage. For example, when we had some findings from audit or technical documentation assessment, and we had to discuss these findings with manufacturer, then we had the technical meetings, the structured dialogue. Recently, the structured dialogue was also extended to application phase. So once the manufacturer submits that application and we have some doubts about the devices covered by the application, then we also have opportunity to exchange information. What is new, this structured dialogue is extended also to pre-application phase, when the customer is not yet our customer because we don't have order, we don't have application, but the manufacturer wants to better prepare for the conformity assessment procedure, then we can apply the structured dialogue, we can exchange information. However, both sides need to remember that structured dialogue, this is not consultation. Notified body cannot provide consultation services. So what we can do here, we can explain what are the requirements, what are expectations from notified bodies, but we cannot give manufacturers the solution. When we have all the information, we met with the customer, we can prepare quotation, what the quotation should include. Of course, estimated costs of the conformity assessment procedure. So the cost of the QMS audit, the cost of technical documentation, assessments, depending on the scope of the devices. Information about costs in surveillance activities. It means cost of surveillance audits, which we have to perform after issue of the certificate. Also costs of unannounced audits, which we have to perform at this moment at least once per 5 years. This is information about, especially when we are talking about technical documentation. In this offer, you will find information about first round of technical documentation assessment, when we review the documentation. But many times, after this first round, we have some questions, we have some findings, so we need to perform next round of the technical documentation assessment. So we have potential extra costs, additional costs of the conformity assessment procedure. In this case, at the initial stage, this is difficult to determine how much time we will need for second round, how much it will cost. So in this case, the regulation allows notified body to provide information about hourly rates. So in the quotation, we will provide information that additional rounds of technical documentation will cost XYZ euros, US dollars, per hour. Estimated timelines. This is something new because at the Commission expects that on the quotation phase, the notified body and the manufacturer will agree the timelines, the schedule of the conformity assessment procedure. When we will start application review, technical documentation assessment, when we perform QMS audit, when the certificate will be issued. Not always this is difficult to define, but of course we have to do our best to somehow describe the timelines. One important information, here we have costs. If the costs will increase, so notified body will increase costs of the conformity assessment procedure, and if the increase will be above 10%, we need to, of course, inform the customer, but we also need to justify. Truly speaking, from the regulatory point of view, this is something new. From practical point of view, nothing new, because always when we have to increase the prices, our customers ask why. So this is clear. Article 2 and 3, timelines and interruptions. I already said on the quotation stage that we need to agree the timelines for the conformity assessment procedures. Of course, the timelines depend on the range of the devices, characteristic of the devices, device class, the activities which we need to perform within scope of the conformity assessment procedure. The regulation says that they should be the shortest possible. What does it mean, the shortest? There is no definition. We try our best to issue the certificate as soon as possible. But to avoid situation that sky is the limit, in the regulation there are specified maximum timelines. So the regulation specifies how much time maximum can notified body spend on QMS audit, on technical documentation assessment. When we are talking about assessment, there are various stages. We assess documentation, we have some findings. After then, the manufacturer needs to provide answers, corrected documents. And the timelines about which we are talking in Article 2, this is time for notified body. When the manufacturer is preparing answer, the clock is stopped. And this is called interruption. So when the manufacturer needs to prepare some answers, some corrections, then the clock is stopped and it will be restarted once the notified body will receive answer from the manufacturer. The timelines, the interruptions, they need to be agreed between the manufacturer and notified body. So once we issue a list of findings, we need to agree with the manufacturer when we should receive the answers. And it should be in writing. So we agree that the answers will be within, let's say, 30 days. And after these 30 days, when we receive the document, the corrected documents, we restart the clock and we continue assessment. During the discussions about the proposed at that time regulation, we asked, okay, here we are talking about the requirements for notified body. Notified body need to do it in these timelines. Notified body need to cover this and this in quotation. But when we are talking about assessment, there is really cooperation between the manufacturer and the notified body. So why there is nothing about the requirements for manufacturer? The answer was easy. The implementing regulation says touches requirements for notified body in Annex 7. That's why there is nothing about manufacturer. But truly speaking, as I said, this is cooperation. If we want to complete the conformity assessment in defined time, issue the certificate as fast as possible, we need to cooperate. If we agree that answer will be within 30 days, the manufacturer should provide the answer within 30 days, because on 31st or 32nd day, there is waiting some expert for the technical documentation to continue assessment. That's why we should keep the dates. If there is extraordinary situation that the manufacturer cannot provide documentation in the required time, it also must be agreed with the notified body in writing that it will be not in 30 days, but in 3 months. Because, for example, there are needed some tests. And what is important, and maybe not all manufacturers recognize that, at least in Europe, there is specified maximum number of the interruptions. So when we have technical documentation, theoretically speaking, before this regulation, we could have 10 rounds of technical documentation assessment. Now, we have maximum number of interruptions. So, I will show you on next slide. We have some finished number of the interruptions. It means finished number of assessments. And after the last round, we need to make a decision. Will we continue and do one more round and finish the assessment with positive result? Or, based on this, let's say 5 rounds, we decide that we have to issue negative report, because still the documentation does not fulfill the requirements. Okay, so here we have table for timelines for initial certification. So when we have initial certification, first step is application review. This stage starts when notified body received complete application. Information about devices, about quality management system. This information is complete. Then we have 30 days for assessment of the application. We have maximum 1 interruption. So once we can come back to the manufacturer for some explanations, some corrections. This stage ends with positive result of application review and signed contract for conformity assessment procedure. This is first step. After then, we have assessment stage, which is QMS OD technical documentation assessment. But what is important, between application review and assessment, there is not defined the time slot. So there is no requirement that within 5, 10, 15 days after application review, we have to start assessment. This is agreement between the manufacturer and the notified body. But once we start the QMS audit or technical documentation assessment, then we have 120 days for audit, 90 days for TD assessment. And in this time, we need to assess the technical documentation from the beginning to the end. It means when we issue the positive or negative report. There we have 4 interruptions. So 4 times we can come back to the manufacturer for some updates, for some answers, for some corrections. And this stage ends with final review. So the result of technical documentation is ready to be sent to certification office for certification decision. The same when we are talking about audit. We have 120 days for entire audit. Stage 1, stage 2, if we need audit of additional facilities or subcontractors, also in this 120 days, we have 4 interruptions. However, in the regulation there is stated that if there are additional sites, we have additional 2 interruptions per each site. So it is a little bit easier. And again, the clock starts in the very first step of audit, it means stage 1, and ends with finished final review. So the results of the audit are ready for certification decision. And once we completed the audit and all technical documentation assessments which were required for the conformity assessment procedure, the documentation is sent to certification office, and certification office has 20 days to make certification decision. There is one additional clock stop, interruption, but we have 20 days to make certification decision, issue the certificate, and what is important, to register this certificate in EUDAMED. I will have some additional slides as a bonus about EUDAMED today, and from notified bodies, big request, please register your devices. Because when we are talking about QMS certificates, if the manufacturer is registered, we can register certificates. But when we are talking about product certificates, type examination or technical documentation assessment certificates, they are linked to specific basic UDIDI in EUDAMED, and if this device is not registered, we cannot register the certificate. When we are talking about the assessment stage, maybe one additional information, for some devices there are required special procedures, like consultation with European Medicinal Agency or expert panel or regulatory authority. The time for consultation with these agencies is additional time, additional interruption, which is not counted here. So here we have timelines for initial certification. When we are talking about changes, because manufacturers have to inform notified bodies about significant changes in products, in quality management system, notified bodies have 30 days for initial assessment of the change. It means to make a decision, we can accept the change based on the provided information, or to decide what we need to do before we accept the change. For example, we have to perform additional audit, or we need to perform additional technical documentation assessment. So we have 30 days for this initial decision. If we need to perform some additional assessments, we have additional 90 days for the audit, for the technical documentation assessment. And after then, as it was for initial certification, we have 20 days for decision and issuing of the certificate, update of the certificate. Of course, we may have situation, because as you can see, this process is faster than the previous one. So sometimes manufacturers will notify us with significant change, but in fact this is a request for new conformity assessment procedure for new devices. So in such situation, when the change requires full conformity assessment procedure, then we are not talking about changes anymore, but we are talking about initial certification. And then we have these timelines. And third slide with timelines, renewal of certificates. In case of renewal, notified body has 90 days for review. At this moment, I would say whatever it means. And we have 3 interruptions. And after these 90 days, we go to certification decision. Notified body has 20 days to issue new certificate. And now I would go to next part of the regulation. It means renewal of certificates. When we are talking about product certificates, I would say there is no revolution in the requirements, because in MDR there is already stated that notified body need to review some updates, let's call it in this way, and based on this issue new certificate. We don't need to perform a full technical documentation assessment once again for the product. But what information we need to issue new product certificate, new type examination, new technical documentation assessment certificate? Of course, we need to get from the manufacturer the application, the same application as for initial certification. There is no difference. The same application. And together with this application, we need to receive additional information like list of all changes. These changes which were already notified to notified body and these which were not notified yet. Maybe because they were not enough significant. The most recent periodic safety update report with summary of field safety corrective actions, if there were any actions. Summary of changes in the risk management. Identification of changes in the device which were taken to implement the changes in state of the art. The most recent clinical evaluation report, in case of IVD devices, performance evaluation report. Identification of changes in applied harmonized standards or common specifications. And based on this information, we have to analyze the information and we need to decide or verify whether the changes are coherent with the collected post-market surveillance information, whether the changes are coherent with state of the art and outcome from risk management, if there were any non-conformities, complaints, non-conformities from assessments, whether the non-conformities were resolved or the actions for the non-conformities were planned and the plan was accepted. Under MDR and IVDR, notified body can issue certificate under condition or with limitation. We don't have so many such certificates, but we can issue such certificates. So when we have recertification, we need to check whether this condition which was originally specified on the certificate, whether this condition is still valid. Maybe it needs to be updated or maybe even it makes no sense and can be deleted. Scope of certificate. Yeah? When we issue new certificate as a renewal, we can modify scope of certificate. So also we need to decide at this stage whether the scope need to be amended. And it was about product certificates. As I said, nothing new. It looks more or less similar as it was based on original MDR. QMS certificate. Of course, again, the manufacturer needs to lodge application, the same application as for initial conformity assessment procedure. But what notified body need to do? The notified body need to verify whether all applicable requirements for the quality management system were at least once audited in the certification cycle. It means from issuance of the previous certificate, current certificate, to the end of validity of the certificate. Whether the results of all surveillance activities, it means surveillance audits, unannounced audits, audits of suppliers, technical documentation assessments, whether results of the assessments are positive and confirm that the requirements of MDR or IVDR are still met. Whether the audit program and sampling for technical documentation are up to date. Truly speaking, in our notified body, we prepare new sampling plan, new audit program for new certification cycle. So we always update this document. And the same what we had for products, if there were any non-conformities from the audits, from the TD assessments, whether they are resolved or addressed in the corrective action plan, whether the conditions or limitations are still valid, and whether we need to change scope of certificate. As you can see, in this text, on this slide, there is nothing about recertification audit. And this is a huge change. Because the implementing regulation says the notified body need to perform review. And on the slides with timelines, there was time for review. So this is the review. We only check whether in the certification cycle, we performed all the surveillance activities and they confirmed that the requirements are fulfilled. We don't need to perform again recertification audit, which is audit of full quality management system. And more or less that's all what is in the interest of manufacturers. I also said that there are requirements for monitoring of costs and duration of certification. This is requirement for notified body. So we need to collect information about all conformity assessment procedures. We need to calculate what is the average time, what is the average cost of the conformity assessment procedure. And starting from 2028, we will need to report this to competent authority, to European Commission, and also we will need to put this information on our website. So manufacturers, in easy way, will be able to find which notified body is cheaper or more expensive, which is faster, and it could be somehow base for your decision, which notified body you want to choose. Okay, second topic for today, concept of MDR IVDR 2.0. Starting from the very beginning, in 2017, the Commission published MDR and IVDR. At that time, it was solution for some problems with incidents which were on the European Union market with some devices. And at that time, it was said that the requirements are too weak, they need to be stronger, the manufacturers should be more controlled by notified body. So MDR and IVDR 1.0 was published. After then, originally the transitional period was, as I could remember, 2021. In the meantime, we had COVID-19. After then, the Commission recognized that we don't have enough notified bodies. The manufacturers are not ready for applying the requirements of MDR. So it was decided to postpone the transitional period. At this moment, for MDR, we have end of 2027, 2028, depending on the class of the device. For IVD, end of 2027, 8, 9, of course, depending on class. So the transitional period was postponed, and with implementation of last amending regulation for IVD, it was said this is last postponement. We will not postpone again the end of transitional period because it will not end at any time. So we need to make some hard stop. More or less, it was similar time when was election in Europe. So we have new parliament, new commissioners, and the commissioners decided specified political guidance. And the regulation in Europe should be competitive. We should focus on digitalization, simplification, innovation, resilience. And based on this guidance, Commissioner for Medical Devices, Mr. Varhelyi, get mission to improve the requirements for medical devices. And as I said, in 2024, we had the consultation. From the consultation in December last year, we received proposal. Huge document. This document covers amendment for MDR and IVDR, around 400 or 500 pages, 2 files, one separate for articles, one separate for annexes, and it started discussion. It started discussion because some requirements, they were expected, because we saw that some requirements are not good, are not proportional. There are some inconsistency in the requirements, but some of them, they surprised us as notified body, and I have a feeling that also surprised some manufacturers. The idea, the objective for the revision can be shown on this slide. So focus on predictability and cost efficiency of certification, requirements more proportionate to the risk of the device, streamline processes, improve government, reduce administrative burden, because the Commission recognized that there is too much reporting. So maybe we could reduce the requirements. Digitalization, support innovation and address special situations, international cooperation with other regions, and better alignment with other regulation and internally. So as I said, there were some inconsistencies. And truly speaking, if I would show you all the changes which we identified, we could spend, I think, 2 weeks here discussing about the changes. But this is discussing about something what is not sure. So we have proposal. The proposal is under discussion. Some of the changes will be implemented. Some of them for sure will be changed. So I prepared one slide for each of the box with some examples of changes. And I will not tell about all of them because it would be too long. Predictability and cost efficiency, something what touches notified body, touches you also. So pre and post submission structured dialogue. As I said, structured dialogue, exchange of information in the pre-submission, pre-application phase, something what was already described in the implementing regulation, and post-submission, it means when we already have application from the manufacturer. It was, as I said, it was described in MDCG guidance document. Now it will be described also directly in the regulation. Second topic, replacement on-site audits by remote audit. In our opinion, this is a step in good direction, because at this moment, MDR, IVDR requires on-site audit. Sometimes we have some difficulties with product specialists, and we have, for example, product specialist in Korea, we have customer in Poland, and this is the only expert. We need to ask the expert to go to Poland for the audit. At least now we have MDCG guidance for hybrid audits. So we can invite the expert remotely for the audit. But it solves only part of the problem. We have problem with some areas of the world where we cannot send our experts. I'm talking about Ukraine, about Israel, about all other regions where we have some conflicts. Notified body will not send experts there because it is not safe for us. So, and at that time, we need to perform the audit. But how to do the audit if we need to do it on-site and we cannot go there on-site? So, the allowance for remote audit, this is a step in good direction. Surveillance audits every second year. This is a surprising requirement. From one side, the idea was to reduce costs for the manufacturers. But truly speaking, I don't see benefit. I don't see reduction of the costs, because most of the manufacturers which are certified to MDR or IVDR, they are also certified to ISO 13485 or MDSAP. Both schemes, ISO and MDSAP, they require annual surveillance audits. So nevertheless, we will visit the manufacturers every year. Recently, I checked how it looks like in our notified body for MDR customers. only 3% of customers, they are certified only to MDR. All others, 97%, they have additionally ISO 13485 or MDSAP certificate. So I would say artificial change. It will not improve. Unannounced audits. At this moment, we have to perform at least once per 5 years unannounced audit. With the new regulation, for a cause. If something happens, if we have information from incidents, from audits, that something wrong happens, then we can go for the unannounced audit. So in 2013, the Commission decided that we as notified body have to perform the unannounced audits to proactively monitor manufacturers, proactively monitor the devices on the market. Now we come back to reactive monitoring. If something happens, if we have already incident, then we can check why it happened. I don't know whether it's a step in good direction. I told you on the previous slides that we need to collect information which allow us to determine whether the manufacturer is small and medium enterprise. This is the topic which is at this moment the hottest one, because the regulation says that the notified body need to apply 50% fee reduction for micro enterprise, 25% for small. And of course, this is good for manufacturers. It should be cheaper. But on the other side, notified bodies, they are not national agencies where we are paid by government. We are companies like you. And we need to earn money to pay our employees. And we have analysis which says that this proposal is not in line with other European requirements. So we will see what will happen with this regulation. What we know already, the Commission asked notified bodies, okay, if you don't want to have the reduction, how can you support the small and medium enterprises? And there are some ideas from our side. They were sent to the Commission. They are under review. Reduced involvement in technical documentation assessment. From one side, we will have less technical documentation assessment in the initial certification. And I think this is a good idea, because then we can faster issue the certificate. But also it says about elimination of technical documentation assessment in surveillance. So at this moment, the idea is that if we have 100 devices and based on current sampling, before we issue certificate, we have to review 5 devices, we will review still 5 or less devices. But currently, after issuance of the certificate, we continue TD assessment and we assess documentation for the other devices in next years. With the new regulation, the idea is that we will review these 5 or less devices, and that's all. We will not review documentation for other devices. Again, if something happens for a cause, we can assess documentation, but if something happens. In case of class A sterile devices, at this moment notified body is involved in the assessment of the sterile aspects. So it was decided that for class A IVD devices, there will not be required involvement of notified body. And topic which somehow is a continuation of the step with renewal of certificates. At this moment, with the implementing regulation, which I showed you in the previous part, we don't have any more recertification audit. We have reviews. In next step, we will issue certificates without expiry date. So it means the certificates will be valid forever until we will not withdraw the certificate. So there will not be recertification, whatever it means, required. However, the Commission decided to keep periodic reviews. So notified body need to perform periodic reviews to check whether the requirements are still fulfilled. Of course, we do it every year after every audit, every technical documentation, we have decision. But periodically, again, does not describe how often, we will review whether the surveillance activities are completed and are completed with positive result. Some other changes, limited scope of devices which require CECP, only to class 3 implantable devices. When we are talking about the requirements more proportional to the device, to the risk class, I think interesting point is definition of well-established technologies. At this moment, we have in Article 52 and 61, there are some devices which are class 2B implantable devices which are exempted from full Annex 9 or from clinical investigations. So now the list will be replaced by definition of well-established technologies, and these well-known devices will has lower requirements in conformity assessment procedure. Of course, additionally, when we are talking about clinical evaluation, the demonstration of safety and performance not always will require clinical data. In some cases, non-clinical data will be sufficient to demonstrate safety and performance of the device. Some other changes at this moment when we are talking about vigilance cases, incidents, these cases, they are assessed by notified body and by the competent authority in parallel. Why? We do the same job. So the Commission identified that there is additional administrative work, and it will be reduced. As I could remember, it will be done only by national competent authority. Reclassification or changes in classification rules. For some devices, the classification rules will be changed for software, and maybe more important change for reusable surgical instruments. One example, when we are talking about surgical instruments used in neurological surgery. The device, because it has contact with a central neurological system, the device at this moment is in class 3. With the modified rule 5 or 6, and 6, all devices which are reusable surgical instruments, doesn't matter with which part of human body they have contact, they will be in class 1, class 1R. So the surgical instruments used in neurological surgery, they will be reclassified from class 3, the highest, to class 1. I saw a nice picture presenting this change, which says, it's only neurological surgery. What can happen? Okay, other changes which make sense. Reduction of administrative burden when we are talking about significant changes. At this moment, manufacturer have to inform notified body about significant changes in the system or in the product, depending on the certificate. But it is not clear what does it mean, significant change. And from one manufacturers, we receive one change in certification cycle. So almost we don't have any information. From other manufacturers, we are flooded by changes because they send us all changes. Whatever they want to change, they want to be sure that it was reported. So we are flooded with the changes. And we need to assess it. Customers need to pay for the assessment. Closed circle. What is the idea? The idea is that in the regulation there will be specified changes which require approval from the notified body. So we need to accept the change. There will be changes which require report. They need to be reported. We don't need to accept, but we need to know about that. And there will be some changes which even doesn't need to be reported to us. So it is a huge change, especially when these types of changes will be precisely described. Additional change in the assessment of changes, predetermined change control plan. So the manufacturer can prepare the plan, it can be agreed with the notified body accepts this plan, and after then, based on this plan, the manufacturer can implement the changes, which will make implementation of the changes easier. Other topics related to reporting, SSCP, SSP, and PSUR. At this moment, the manufacturer have to send to notified body SSCP for class 3 and implantable devices. The same with PSUR. With each and every update, the manufacturer needs to submit to notified body PSUR for class 3 and implantable devices. The change will be the regulation will reduce scope of devices which will require this assessment. And in case of PSUR, will reduce frequency of updates. More I will show you on next slides, and also my colleague will have one slide related to this. Innovative devices, I think the best change which is in this part, to Article 52, there was added 2 additional special conformity assessment procedures for breakthrough and orphan devices. These devices will have its own separate procedure, which is easier than for other devices. Streamline procedures, improve governance. This is portion of changes which are related to assessment of notified bodies. So from one side, the designation process will be easier, so more notified bodies can be authorized as notified body. On the other side, the Commission decided to change monitoring of notified bodies, because at this moment, every year we have audit like you have, and the audits are done by our national competent authority. And once per 5 years, we have audit which is called JAT audit. It means Joint Assessment Team, members from the Commission, our designation authority, and representatives of some other competent authorities. They come to us and they do audit. The idea for the change is that the JAT audits will have every second year. Interesting proposal. I don't know where from the Commission will take resources for that, but it's not our problem. In case of any disputes between the manufacturer and notified body, the national competent authority will be the body which will decide who is right. Further digitalization. At this moment, we have some devices for which electronic instruction for use is acceptable. So now the list of devices is extended. And additionally, some information which are not critical for safety and performance, they can be on digital label. They don't need to be physical. And another change, now we have UDAMET ready. So next step is, could we somehow digitalize conformity assessment procedure? Why not? We can try. So the idea is that the conformity assessment procedure can be digitalized. So some reports, assessments can be more in digital way. And also, here we have labeling, IFU in electronic version. Also, declaration of conformity will be allowed to be established in electronic way, not in well-known paper way. Better alignment with other requirements and internally. So from one side, removal of internal inconsistency, because some articles said something completely different. On the other side, when we are talking about artificial intelligence, at some point of time, there was a risk that there will be required 2 certifications. One for medical devices and separate for AI Act. At this moment, it was decided that AI Act goes together with MDR, so we will have one notified body which cover medical devices, which covers software, which cover AI. So doing assessment procedure for the software, we will cover requirements of MDR or IVDR and also AI Act. International cooperation. Yeah, Marcos already showed that European Union is one of official observer of MDSAP program. True. Will European Union be a member? I'm not sure. Maybe somewhere in the future. But what is good, at this moment, the Commission decided that the MDSAP report, which was presented by Marcos, it can be accepted also for MDR, IVDR conformity assessment procedures. So at this moment, we have in many cases situation that we perform one audit which covers MDSAP, maybe ISO 13485 and MDR, and we issue 2 certificates as a notified body for MDR and maybe ISO, and separate for MDSAP, because we need to use the dedicated template. Okay, we cannot skip the dedicated template, but what we can do, and it was already accepted by the Commission, we can use the dedicated MDSAP template also for MDR. There is everything what is needed. That's why it will be easier for notified bodies. It will be also easier to customers. And more or less that's all. I don't want, as I said, I don't want to go into details because we could spend a lot of time. Surveillance activities. Next section of my presentation, I will focus on post-market surveillance. What is post-market surveillance? This is part of this is part of manufacturer's quality management system. This is required by MDR, IVDR, MDSAP. This is a system where the manufacturer collects data about quality, performance, and safety of the device from the market. When the device is already placed on the market, we collect information from users, from patients, from importers, distributors. And based on analysis of this information, we update risk management if needed. It may require also changes in the design or manufacturing process of the device or information attached to the device. It may require changes in the clinical evaluation, in SSCP, maybe can require also field safety corrective actions. And if it is not incident, however, the information is important, it may need to be reported in the trend reporting. The system is described in MDR, Article 83, and in Annex 3. In Annex 3 says about PMS plan, how to collect the data, how to analyze the data, and says about reporting. We have post-market surveillance report, we have periodic safety update report. Depending on the class of the device, we have two options. What should be covered by the PMS plan? The sources of information which the manufacturer needs to collect. So information about serious incidents, information about field safety corrective actions, non-serious incidents, undesirable side effects, trend reporting, information from professional literature, databases, registers, information from feedbacks and complaints, from users, distributors, importers, and information about similar, publicly available information about similar devices. Here I would like to stop for a second. Experience from technical documentation assessments and from audits. In technical documentation assessment, in PMS plan, we see the chapter information about similar devices, whatever it means. And we usually ask the manufacturer, okay, what is the scope of similar devices? In some cases, the manufacturer refers to specific devices of competitors. From one side, it is good because we exactly know which devices are observed by the manufacturer. In some cases, we have reference to the device group, electrocardiographs, for example. We don't need to specify precisely the devices. We collect information about all electrocardiographs. But the general statement, information about similar devices, usually it is not acceptable by auditors because it says nothing. We need to know what are the keywords, what are the devices for which we are looking for the information. In the plan, there should also be described methods and tools, protocols, how the information needs to be collected, how the information needs to be processed. And reporting. I said that we have two options. We have post-market surveillance report, which is used for class 1 medical devices and class A and B IVD devices. And this report includes the summary, the results from the analysis of the post-market surveillance data. When it needs to be updated? When necessary. If the manufacturer collects information which are significant and need to be in the report, then the manufacturer updates the report. In case of class 2A, 2B, class 3 medical devices, or class C and D, IVD, the manufacturer needs to prepare periodic safety update report. Of course, this report also includes a summary from the post-market surveillance. Additionally, it includes conclusion for risk-benefit determination, main findings from PMCF, PMPF for IVD, volume of cells, population using the device, frequency of use. This is periodic safety update report, so it means that periodically it needs to be updated. So in MDR there is stated that for class 3 and class 2B devices, it needs to be updated annually, at least annually. It means when after 3 months after update, we have information which is significant, we should update again the PSUR. For class C and D, IVD, also annually, but for class 2A, at least once per 2 years. This requirement will be changed, but I don't want to spoiler my colleague. In case of class 3 and implantable devices, as well as class D IVD, the manufacturer, once he updates the PSUR, he needs to submit the PSUR to the notified body using UDAMET, and the notified body needs to assess the PSUR as additional action. Of course, we assess post-market surveillance during audits, but in case of these devices, we have the additional action that we need to review the updated PSUR. And by intention, I said using UDAMET. However, at this moment, this is not fully true. Because at this moment, still the manufacturer should use agreed solution agreed with the notified body. Why? This is bonus. I want to tell you, it was not intended at the beginning. I want to add a few slides related to UDAMET, because yesterday was a very important day when we are talking about UDAMET. So a few words about UDAMET. UDAMET, it is electronic system which is defined by MDR, which consists of 6 modules: registration of actors, manufacturers, importers, authorized representatives, registration of devices, registration of certificates and applications, market surveillance, mostly used by competent authority, vigilance, which is used by manufacturers, will be used by manufacturers for reporting incidents, PSURs. And we have 6th module, clinical and performance studies. This module is under development. Initially, the MDR said that once UDAMET, it means all the modules, are fully functional, the Commission will publish an information, and starting from this moment, using of UDAMET will be mandatory. In 2024, the Commission recognized it will not fly, because we have these 5 modules, but clinical investigations, it is under development. It needs additional 1.5 to 2 years. So the Commission decided once any of these modules is ready, audit is done, it is verified that this is in line with specification, then the module become mandatory. So 3 modules, actor, device, and certificate, they were available in live system, and they could be used voluntarily. And in 2025, the Commission published information that these 4 modules, so additionally market surveillance, they are ready for using. So in November, it was published information, and 6 months later, it means yesterday, it is the day from which these 4 modules, they are mandatory for use. What does it mean? What is the change? Maybe I will skip this information. When we are talking about the registration of actors, starting from yesterday, the actors have to register themselves in Udamed. When we are talking about the registration of devices, if the device is placed on the market for first time, starting from yesterday, it needs to be registered before placing on the market. But if we are talking about device, which is legacy device or regulatory device, but it was placed on the market before 28th of May, the manufacturer has additional 6 months until November this year to register the devices. So no hurry. But on the other side, please register because we need this information to register certificates. For notified bodies, all certificates which we issue starting from yesterday, or changes or decisions on certificates starting from yesterday, they have to be registered immediately without delay. In the presentation for timelines, we have 20 days for the decision and registration. So it should be fast. When we are talking about certificates which have been issued before 28th of May, and there is no changes, so we don't have anything here, then we have to register the certificates until May next year. Why? Because in many cases, we have to wait for the devices which manufacturers can register until November. And I think one of last slides, market surveillance. This module is mandatory from yesterday. So from yesterday, the module is also available in Udamed. It was not available in live system 2 days ago. And vigilance, at this moment, the Commission planned the audit of this module, and this module is intended to be released, mandatory, somewhere in second quarter of 2027. And that's all. Thank you very much.